So today we are going to talk about Studio Pia. Studio Pia is a lingerie brand, and if you like lingerie, like me, chances are pretty high that you have already heard about Studio Pia and that they are closing. But maybe they are not closing because today, just like 5 minutes earlier when I sat to record and I opened the Studio Pia Instagram, I discovered that there was a post yesterday saying that maybe they are going to be open for a little while, but I think that it's best to start the story at the beginning. So the idea of this video is to talk about this brand because it made a huge impact on the lingerie industry and to analyze a bit what's the style of the brand, what's so unique about it, and maybe we are going to take one of the designs and dissect it in close so we can take a closer look at the patterns. So what is Studio Pia? Studio Pia is a UK brand that was founded by Pia Harper, who was the head designer for Bordel, also a very important brand that has a very distinct design aesthetic. So Pia went from Bordel on to found her own brand, and one thing that differentiates her brand from a lot of the things that were already on the market at that moment was that she was very upfront on the sustainability aspect. So Pia is vegan, and for her brand she decided to use a type of silk that is known as pea silk or cruelty-free silk. It's also known as Aimsa, I think it's called, and it's a type of silk that it's made without killing the worms, the silkworms. I have read a lot about this type of silk because I was considering for a time incorporating it into my own brand, and I discovered that it may not be exactly cruelty-free. There are other factors involved in the production of this kind of silk, and it depends a lot on the specific silk manufacturer that you choose to. But anyways, the silkworms aren't killed on the making of the silk. So that was one of the things that differentiated Studio Pia from other brands. And also she took part on other initiatives about sustainability, like she planted a tree for every bra or like every garment purchase in collaboration with an organization that did that. And she had a lot of information on her website about how the pieces were ethically made in Europe and in the UK, in small factories and things like that. But even though it's first and foremost a sustainable brand, it doesn't look like your normal sustainable lingerie brand because the designs are so striking. Her first collection was inspired by Rousseau, the painter, not the philosopher, and it featured a gorgeous embroidery with plants and leaves and all of this range of colors in the greens and yellows. Those were like different from anything else that was on the market at that point. Even though Pia came from Bordel, and you can see that there's a bit of that Bordel strappy aesthetic in the designs, they are so different that it's not a Bordel copy, it's something else entirely. They have kind of like a lightness to them, a delicacy where Bordel has a much more strong kind of bondage aesthetic with all the straps around the body. Studio Pia had a hint of that, but it translated it into a much softer aesthetic, and every detail gave the impression of being very refined, very well thought out. So the straps weren't there just for being strappy, just for following the strappy trend, but because they had a function, they made the bras and the panties adjustable. So that's also something that was a bit different from a lot of the brands that were out there, even though some independent designers were already using this kind of techniques. And of course, another thing that configured the visual identity of Studio Pia was that the embroideries were custom made, were designed by Pia herself. So her embroideries were completely unique. There were no other brands that were using the same fabrics, and they always had a very interesting inspiration behind. Like, she used to get inspired sometimes by artists, like in that first collection. She has some collections that have a very strong inspiration on the surrealist aesthetic, like Salvador Dali or Schiaparelli. And in all of those collections, aside from the embroideries, they were always combined with very unusual colors that what we are normally used to see in lingerie. She used a lot of greens, of bright blues. So she continued releasing collection after collection, and some of them were better than others, but I have to say that most of them were highly original, and it was a very distinctive style. So you would see a Studio Pia piece and you immediately knew that it was from her brand. But in later years, the collection releases weren't as frequent. Some of the collections were a bit more not as exciting. Sometimes they were a bit repetitive, and especially the brand started having huge sales. So some of the items which were very, very, very expensive, because we are talking about silk and custom embroideries and gold-plated hardware and all of that. So some of those pieces were discounted at like 50%. And as I have read online, some of the commentary on Reddit, for example, on other sites, were that some people were a bit hesitant to buy from Studio Pia full price when they knew that a lot of those garments were going to be discounted at 50%. And it also created the idea that the brand was inflating the prices. I don't know how Studio Pia works, but I don't think the brand was inflating the prices, because for the kind of materials that they were using and the complexity of those designs, I feel like the price, even though it was expensive, it's as much as you would expect for something like that. But of course, that's just like kind of my feeling about the whole pricing situation. I haven't seen her account. But that takes us to last year, when the brand announced that they were being bought by a company called Ink & Co. And shortly after that, they did a rebranding. And then there was silence, and then there was an announcement saying that the brand was closing. Essentially, Pia explained that they were promised some funds. I'm assuming that they were going to come from that company that bought them, and the funds never came, so they couldn't cope with the finances of the business, and she decided to close the brand. And apparently, it turns out that this Ink & Co company, the founders have been charged with a lot of shady stuff. So I will leave a link to that story. I have discovered this today, actually, while I was doing some research for the video. So it seems that that was the reason why the funds never came to Studio Pia. And they did a huge closing sale during Christmas. But plot twist, today Pia published on the Instagram account an important announcement saying that the closing sale went so well that they had the funds to basically fund 2 or 3 collections, actually. So it seems that we will have some more Studio Pia for just a little longer. We don't know if it's going to continue from now on, or if they are just going to manufacture those couple of collections that they had the funds to do now after the closing sale, but then maybe they have to close anyway. But I personally would be sad to see them go, because I think that Pia had a very fresh approach to luxury lingerie, sustainable luxury lingerie. She was doing things with this brand that shaped the lingerie scene at the time. So I would hope that she continues with the brand and creates some more new collections, so we have something to get excited to about the future. But even if they end up closing, I really wanted to make a video to kind of remember them and celebrate them for all the things they brought into the lingerie industry. And that's also why I thought about taking one of those designs and trying to recreate something similar using Clo, like recreating the pattern, so we can take a closer look at all those fine details and talk a bit more about lingerie construction and lingerie pattern making, because I think that we can learn a lot from Studio Pia. I'm on the Studio Pia Instagram page, so I can show you some of the styles of past collections. So this is more or less what Studio Pia launched with, and this is probably the most iconic piece of that collection. I think that it was incredibly bold to launch with a collection that was mainly green and yellow, when those were colors that didn't exist in the lingerie world. So all of this collection felt very new and very fresh. And after this, Studio Pia had several amazing collections as well. And one of my favorite was this one that it was called Myra. And all the embroidery had the hands as the main theme. It was also very tied to the surrealism art movement. And those are some of my favorite pieces that feature that hands embroidery. But my absolute favorite of all Studio Pia collections is the Kana and Yuna range. So all of these pieces were inspired by Japanese culture and especially by Japanese lacquer work, and they feature a beautiful embroidery in tones of gold and black and sometimes red, with trees and flowers and little birds. And I think this is the most beautiful collection I have ever seen. And I think I'm going to choose one of the pieces of this range so that I can recreate that in Clo3D later. I particularly like this set, this quarter cup bra and the matching high waist panty, because I think that we can talk a lot about how Studio Pia used that embroidery to create a set that is very unique, but also it was repeated in a lot of her collections, like that quarter cup silhouette and also the style of the panties were very common in the previous and later collections that she did. But let's see some other recent collections of Studio Pia. This one was called Maya, and the embroidery was really beautiful as always. And what got my attention was that this pattern of the embroidery was inspired by the shapes that the waves that the sea foam makes when the waves hit. I think it created a super unique embroidery, and I love that story behind the designs. And if we go to some of the more current ranges, we have this, I think it's called Leonora, and this other that is Elsa. Those two are also very inspired by the surrealism movement. And this one, the Leonora range, I think is super interesting because I think that including those eyes on a piece of lingerie gives a lot of food for thought, because lingerie traditionally is considered a garment, especially like super nice lingerie like this, that you wear to be seen. We know that it may not necessarily be the case, but that's the traditional approach to lingerie. And it's very interesting that Studio Pia has included all those eyes in the embroidery, because it subverts that relationship between the wearer and the viewer. The lingerie and the body of the person that is wearing it, it's no longer the passive object of that gaze, but instead the active subject. So the lingerie is looking at you, it's not just being looked at. So I think it can be taken as a commentary on the male gaze, on kind of a subversion of that male gaze, and as a way to reclaim that agency that the lingerie wearer has, and kind of negating that convention that fine lingerie is only worn to be seen. So here is the lingerie, the one that is looking at you, and I think that's very original. Okay, so let's see what we can do. I have here a very basic bra and panty pattern. The only change I made is that I already added the straps for the back, but it's like a very simple rendition of that strap detail. It's just so that I have kind of like a base to work with. So this is what we have to start with, and I have added here some of my inspiration images. So this is the set that I'm trying to recreate, or at least be inspired by. And here I have more clear pictures of other sets because they share some characteristics with this set, so I can check the details here better than in a flat image. So what I want to do is this kind of quarter cup bra, and then the panty is this thong that attaches at the waist with these double straps, and then to the gusset area with another pair of straps. So the back will be kind of similar to this part, and then these other straps that in this case are detachable, and then for the bra, the back should be something very similar to this. So our quarter cup bra doesn't have any darts. We can see that here, for example, and the first thing that I need to do is to rotate this dart because I don't want it to be here. I could do this in a number of ways, but I'm going to choose the easy one. I'm going to remove the curve of this dart, so I'm going to delete all the curve points, and now I'm going to select these parts of the dart and I'm going to rotate the dart. So this would be my new cup, and now I'm going to draw a line from here to the strap attachment point. I'm going to select it and cut, and I'm going to delete this part. And now I'm going to simulate. And what I can see from seeing this picture and also this other picture is that the cup is lower in the strap attachment point and also in the center front. So I know that I have to lower this part and also lower slightly this other part. In the real world, when we change this part, the wire line of a bra, we have to make sure that we have the correct wire to insert it after we make the changes. Let's pretend that I have already done that and that I can lower this part around 1 centimeter, 1.5. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to make the cup match that new seam, and we simulate. So now I'm going to make this part slightly lower. And now showing you the nipples of this avatar is going to probably get me banned from YouTube, so I'm going to cover this somehow. Okay, so now we have the most ridiculous nipple covers in the history of humankind, but let's focus on continuing with the bra. So this bra has a partial band construction, which means that the wire is attached, the wire casing is attached directly to the pattern of the cup. And for that, I need to change both the pattern of the cup and also the band. So I'm going to select all of this and I'm going to create an internal line of 1 centimeter. And now I can separate that from the band pattern. Now I would add 1 centimeter to this part of the cup, extend the pattern outline 1 centimeter, and here. And now I'm going to add the sewing lines again. And these pieces now I'm going to unarchive and attach them on top of this piece. And I'm going to apply a more stable fabric to these pieces. So I have here this one that I have called marquisette, and I'm going to apply it because it's a more rigid fabric than the other ones. So it looks a little bit more structured. And now I can finish making that band. I can cut around here to make that center front. It has a bias binding, also finishing that part. And then the rest of the band will have the lace. I don't think it has a side seam. And now that we have the main structure of the bra already made, I'm going to focus on the panty. So what we have is a high-waisted panty, and then we have a very interesting use of the embroidery, because obviously this embroidery has a fixed length. So for pieces that are quite long like this, it had to be cut in two. And I really like that they have made a feature of that. So they have used the edge of the embroidery around this part. So I'm going to try to recreate that shape. I think I'm going to raise the waist of this panty around 1 centimeter so that it hits at the narrower part of this avatar. So now I'm going to raise the leg line a little bit, and I'm going to make the thong shape at the back. So I'm going to make the back quite small.
Fear of sin been keeping you in. Don't you know you're your own teacher? Don't look without, look within. Don't you know you're your own teacher?
And now I have more or less the shape at the back. I'm going to apply elastic to these two straps, and for now I'm going to make this piece transparent until I add the straps at the sides. So I'm going to simulate and see how that looks. If we look at the picture, I can see that the crotch piece is actually larger than mine is right now, and it comes more or less until half of the bump. So I'm going to fix that right now. I'm going to make this piece go around here. So I'm going to make this one 5 centimeters larger and this 5 centimeters smaller. And I'm going to make these two pieces match. At the front, I also think that this part comes a bit higher. And now I'm going to make the straps at the back also in a very simple way, like I did for the back of the bra.
Fear of sin been keeping you in. Don't you know you're your own teacher? Don't look without, look within. Don't you know you're your own teacher? Teach me, teach.
And now that we have the back more or less settled, let's do the front. So I'm going to make the panels more or less around here, and then this other panel around here. And now the problem with this piece is that we cannot have a curve because we are going to have the lace edge there. And now with all this structure in place, I can start adding the finer details and the fabrics.
Who came and showed me the clear empty mirror right there before me. I saw myself, I saw myself, I saw myself. All the mirrors in the world don't point to the sky. The true one lies within these eyes. I know myself, I know myself, I know myself.
So now I have finished creating the basic shape of this set. And if you think that this part is a little weird, it is, but what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to mimic this kind of construction where the edge of the embroidery is put on top of the lower part of the brief. So if I make this transparent, it should look like this. So this part is on top and is stitched along the edge of the embroidery. I will probably add a line of top stitch later to mimic that. But for now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add some of these fabrics and see how they look. What I want essentially is that this embroidery edge matches the side of the bra. So now I'm going to apply it to the rest of the pieces. And these are fabrics that I have scanned. Obviously, they aren't like the beautiful embroideries designed by Studio Pia. These are just like stock fabrics. And also take into account that when I apply these embroideries, they are very obviously not in the correct scale. So if I wanted to be super realistic, super precise, I would have to make sure that the scale that I'm using here in Clo matches the correct scale of the embroidery in real life. And also in all of these fabrics, I have applied a custom preset that I have made for rigid lace or for rigid embroidery. And that's super important when we are working in Clo and we try to mimic real garments, because in this exercise today is more about the design. But if I wanted to make a real pattern out of this and make sure that it fits, I will have to pay a lot of attention to the shape of the pattern pieces, but also the fabric properties that I'm using. And now I'm going to try this new feature that Clo has since the last version that allows you to switch the color of the fabrics. So let's see if we can make it a little bit more golden. So something like this, for example. If we go to the render and quickly see what we have, we can see more clearly the construction of the set and these two fabrics overlapping each other. I might have to fix that gap there, but this is more or less the idea. So I would add some zigzag stitching around here, and then I would obviously add more zigzag stitching and more stitching in general. And something that I do find very interesting is this shape that happens at the back of the panty. So if we go to the examples that I had, this one was the original one, and then this one that had a very similar back. And we can see that it actually makes the same kind of weird shape, because obviously this doesn't have any boning in it. It seems like it's just a piece of bias tape or something. So it doesn't have enough structure to keep this part straight. Now in Clo, I could choose this piece and apply a fabric that has a lot more structure to it. So for example, I can choose this hardware fabric. And if I simulate, I see that it looks way more straight, but this wouldn't be the real shape of the back of that panty. So I think it's very cool that Clo allows us to see that. And now I'm going to finish this and I will show you the result, and I will also apply several of the other fabrics that I have so that we can see how the fabric makes a huge difference. And I think that Studio Pia is very aware of that, because they, as we have seen, repeat a lot of the base style but change the fabric or change some small details to make them seem completely different. We can see how the entire mood, the entire feeling, the entire aesthetic of the set changes a lot depending on which fabrics and which colors are we using for that. So I hope this serves as a kind of inspiration for you to try to play with different fabrics and colors when you are designing. So I hope you found this video helpful, that it gave you some food for thought about lingerie construction and also about a lingerie brand that did things differently. And this can maybe inspire you to create your own designs, your own patterns, or maybe to look into other brands that are doing interesting things like Studio Pia did. So let me know in the comments which one is your favorite Studio Pia design. And for now, have a lovely rest of your day and see you soon in the next video.